What we're going to show you in this video is how I made the gear reduction for the Carriage. I found it very important because it's geared way too high and it makes it hard to move it just a little bit, like 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch. It's almost impossible because it just moves too fast and it's sort of herky-jerky. So one thing that I didn't mention and I discovered later was the first gear I used was only 54 teeth. It was a little bit smaller diameter. So I have to do some milling on these and make it a little bit wider for that gear to fit in there. So you'll see some changes as I go, but I'll explain all that as I go along. But the difference was that I had a smaller gear in there and didn't realize it at first. One of the main things to keep in mind is you want this to stick out just about exactly 1 inch. And that's because you can still put this handle right back on there and use the lathe, because you're going to need the lathe while you're working on this part. So that's the trick, to keep it within 1 inch of that surface. And that's all you need to get the gears in there. Actually, it's probably a little more than you need, but a little extra is better than not. Okay, I've taken off the left side so I can measure it and show you what it is. And this is exactly 3 by 3, nothing special. And this step is 1 inch deep. And the reason is because when you put this on there, it gauges it, so you have a 1 inch stick out on the front face here, and it matches that one, which is 1 inch. So all this is it's basically 1 inch thick here. It was 3/4, but I added a 1/4 inch on, so you need 1 inch. You can do any kind of a build-up, but what you want is a piece sticking out here that you can put your bolts into, and this one is 3/8 thick at this point. And it's milled back in here 1 inch exactly, and then I put this 1/4 piece on here. So what you end up with here is 3/4, but that's what you're going to put your shafts into. Put this back on because it can be on there the whole time until we're ready to drill the shaft holes in it. It doesn't get in the way. Now these holes that I put in here, I drilled the piece first, then I marked the holes and drilled them and tapped them. Now I just had to drill those with a hand drill. I didn't take this machine apart or anything to drill those and tap them. It's into cast iron and I didn't hit anything important inside, so I guess it's okay. But you probably don't want to run the drill in too deep, but I'm not sure if I ran it through. Why don't I check on that? I'll see if I ran them through. So I took that bolt out, and this drill does go through. So I went through on both of these and tapped it. So it's safe to drill in there. I don't feel anything way in there. Now I'm going to take the second piece off and show you how it's made. The main thing to remember in this one is you've got to get it far enough away from the gear, and there's 2 ways to do it. I already had this one on there, so what I've done is cut away part of it so that I could get the gear in there. But there's another way to do it that's probably a little easier. See, this shaft sticking out here is out about 1/8 of an inch. So you could actually cut a little relief into here and slide that over and get your gear clearance. And these holes here, I should check too to see the depth if I went through on them. And I did. There's nothing in there. You can go right through safely. I can shove that drill all the way in there. There's nothing behind it. So you can drill and tap those holes with no problem. I used a number 10. I think it's a 1032 screw here. And that's just about for everything. There's 1032s. And they go nicely into a piece of 3/8. So the second way to do it is you can cut the gear radius in here, which is probably a little more difficult to do. But because I already had this mounted on there, that's the way I did it. But you could just move this over by giving a relief on the back side here for that shaft, and that would do the same thing. So with this all on there, as you can see, I can still put the handle back on the lathe and use the lathe. I didn't get the key in there, so that just spins, but with the key in there. Also, you notice this lathe has a feature where this will pull out and disengage. And that feature is actually going to go away when you build this, because when you put this together with the shims and so forth, it's going to hold that engaged all the time, and the handle will turn as you use power feed. But I don't find any problem with that. That's no problem whatsoever. And speaking of the handle, I have changed that to a larger cast iron handle to get more leverage. As you can see, this is much easier to hold and grab, and it gives you a much smoother action when you have the leverage. And you can also see that I've changed this one too. Made this an inch larger to get a little more leverage on it, and it makes it turn smoother. Both of these pieces on here, we got to remake this cover. And this cover is not going to be big enough because the gears are a little bit larger. But this side is all going to stay the same. So what I'm going to do is make a new cover that's just a little bit longer here, a 1/4 inch exactly, and transfer these holes onto it. So this is 5/16 thick. You probably could use 1/4. You certainly could use something thicker like 3/8. But 5/16 is what I had in the drawer, so that's what I'm using. So I'm going to cut this a little bit oversized and then square it and transfer these holes over to it. So I'm just going to square this edge against that edge. That's because that edge is the finished edge, and get my measurements from that. Good and square. Now we'll put some bluing on it. This one's going to be a little bigger than the other one, so we'll come down here, hopefully, and over here, I think. Okay, height this. I'm going to make this a little bit larger than it actually has to be. So we got to go 250. I got to get the calculator. We got 4. I don't know. Yeah, 3,975. 4,225, and I'm going to give it an extra 50 thousandths on the length. And that'll be where I cut it. First thing I'm going to do is transfer these 2 holes onto this other piece, and that will give me the reference between this and that. I'm not worried about these because this is going to change, but I'm just going to get that on there square and drill through that and counterbore those holes so I can bolt it on there. Okay, those are nice and parallel. I'm going to transfer these 2 holes down through. Going to set up my dial indicator here so that I can counterbore them to depth. These got to go 175 thousandths deep, so we're going to zero this.
Right there.
I've got this lined up, the two holes, and I'm going to transfer this hole and drill that so I can actually put this on. Yeah. So we got to get a center punch, transfer punch maybe that'll fit in there hopefully. Let's try this one. Ooh, what an eye, huh? I need a hammer. That should be the center of that hole, hopefully. I measured the threaded part of the shaft that the hand wheel goes on, and I come up with 235 to 240 thousandths. So I'm going to drill a 235 thousandths hole, which is around 234 is 15/64. I'll try that first and see how that works. If I can get it over that shaft, it should line up, everything should line up. Okay, so when I tested this on there, this corner was a few thousandths low, so this hole has to go down so I can bring this up. So we'll have to do a little filing here. I want to get it just about as perfect as I can. Here it is installed, and the two bolts fit, and it's flush at the top, so it's pretty well centered. And as you can see, that shaft is centered in there, and I can't really show you it. It turns nicely, but it's as close as I can get it centered. And that's our starting point for this gear. Has a nice big boss on it, which I can grab to bore the hole. So that's what I'm going to do. And eventually I'll turn most of this boss off of there. Because you don't need the key, the screw hole at all. It'll stay on there with just the key. And it's mounted between two bushings in there. And it can just float back and forth. So the first thing you have to do is make the big gear hole to fit that shaft, which is, I measure it as 12 millimeters. So I don't have anything that's 12 millimeters, so I'll have to bore that hole out and get it 12 millimeters and then put a keyway in it. I've got to bore this out to 12 millimeters, so I'm going to open it up with a couple of drills because 12 millimeters is almost a ½ inch. So I'm going to run a few drills through there to get it a little larger. This is a 1/4 inch. And get it out near the boring size, and then I'll bore it to 12 millimeters.
There's the hole there. That's a much better cut.
55. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove all of this boss before I cut the keyway, because it's hard to cut the keyway the deeper it is. So I'm just going to get rid of this, and I've got to put a piece of aluminum around it to protect it and just put it in the lathe joint. Perfect.
Close it down a little bit.
Here I had 2 shims. So what I'm going to do is leave part of this boss on here to make up for one of the shims that I had there. So in order not to have to cut the keyway in this part, I'm going to just counterbore the boss. So I'm going to broach this keyway in here. Going through rather nicely. Whoop. So there's the keyway all done. It took 2 passes. I had to put a shim in it, but that's it. Before, when I made the other one, I had made this 12 millimeter metric guide for the keyway broach, and I already had it. But you'll have to make one of those. It's 12 millimeters that fits in there. But these are pretty easy to make. So the next thing I have to make is a little plug that'll fit in there and center this gear right there. And I'll have to turn that on the lathe. So like I said before, you have to have the lathe to use. So I'll put the handle back on there with the keyway, and we'll make this piece this size. So what I'm going to do is turn that down to this 12 millimeter size, and I'm going to have to use power feed because this handle is so herky-jerky. I like to use the power feed, so it's going to make a little noise here. Now I'm going to make the diameter to fit into the plate. So that's going to be 268. So there it is. Nice fit. So we'll part that off. I actually saw it off in the saw. So there it is in place. Actually, I'll put it on this way. Get it flat down. And now I'm going to position this one. Now this one isn't critical at all because that's where your handle is going. I mean, you could go over here if you had a big enough gear to go in between. But I'm going to keep it fairly close to this because of the width of my blocks. And then the second one will be the only one that's really critical. And I'll show you how to do that so it's not too hard. So do this one first. So now what I'm going to do is make this gear to fit on that shaft and remove the boss from it. I'll have to put a keyway in it. So that'll be the next step. So in order to turn the boss off of here, I'm going to use a fixture, You could actually wrap aluminum around this and put it right in the chuck, but it's harder to get it centered and running true. So I just use one of these little fixtures here that I've made before, and this one happens to be just exactly the right size for that gear. Now that should run true, and let me get a hammer to tap it. I'm just going to check that and see if I can get it to bite. A little tight, but that's it. I'll just ream it from there on. So now I'm going to set up the gears on the front plate, and I've made a little jig that holds it in position that fits the gear perfectly and goes into this hole, which is the pivot point where the old handle was. So that gets that gear in position. And then the second gear is the idler gear, and I've got a piece of thin plastic on here so to give it a little clearance. And it really doesn't matter where you put this, but I'd say just put it right about there. And then I'm going to take a punch and punch that hole. I'm just holding the gear in there, and hopefully that will be accurate enough. Now what I'm going to do is drill and ream a 1/4 inch hole for that idler gear. And the idler gear has a bushing in it, so it turns on a dowel pin. So I don't need any bushing into this, it just has to be a hole. I'm going to step up fairly slowly on this to keep it accurate. It's a 1/4 inch dowel pin, fits in there perfectly. It's 1/1000th over. So now we're going to put this on there. Hopefully it fits. I know the dowel pin fits because I tried that, but this gear should drop right in there and turn perfectly. Yep, it does. Just a tiny, tiny little bit of play, and that's it. Goes all the way around. The same thing for the driving gear. This is the gear that the handle will be on. I'll put this piece of plastic in here. This is a 1.5 thick polyethylene. So it just holds it away. I take a 3/8 center punch. I gotta move this over to the block of steel. And where that handle goes really doesn't matter as long as it's in relation to this gear is good. So we should be good. And there's the prick punch mark. So I'm going to use the milling machine this time to drill the hole because I got to go up to a 3/8 and it's more likely to wander. So we'll get that centered on there. That looks pretty good. Here again, I'm going to start with a small hole and step up very slowly, just taking a 32nd at a time. That'll keep the hole pretty well centered. and I won't have to bore it. It should be close enough. Okay, we got the hole in there. I'm just going to deburr it slightly. And we'll see if it fits. We did that accurately enough. That's the new gear. It goes on here, I think. Yep. Yep. And then the idler gear goes there, and it fits perfectly. So we already know this goes on and fits. There it is. Now we have to do the assembly. But I do have to put a keyway in this gear first. Put a little more oil on it. Gotta get a little shim in there. Push it down a little further. So this is the final test. If this works, we'll go ahead and mount it. Yep, it all seems to fit good. No hang-ups. This is the left side, and what I had to do from the old one was add a 1/4 inch shim here, so now that makes that, it's actually 1 inch thick here. And it's just milled in here. Actually, it doesn't matter how far, but you've got to have a plate on this side to accept the 2 shafts for the other 2 gears. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this and then use a punch just to get the holes for the shafts. There it is installed, and as you notice, there's no holes here. The original plate was here, and so the holes are going to move a little bit to the left, I believe. So in order to line those holes up there, what I've got is a little pin here with a point on it so that I can mark for the second holes, because this obviously I'm keeping this one right where it was. And I have to line the holes up for these 2. So I'm going to just punch that and put 1 screw in it and then move the pin down and punch it in, and that'll mark the hole for me. See how that line's right up perfect, perfectly level. And we'll tap this one. Okay, now I'm going to mark this plate for the shafts that go through it with my handy little center punches here. Okay, and this is the 1/4 inch hole. Now I got to take it apart again and take that plate over there and drill the holes in it, and that should be it. Okay, there's the plate, and as you can see, there's 2 nice prick punch marks. So I'm going to mark the bottom one 1/4 inch so these 2 holes I'm going to drill in the milling machine because I want them really precise. Once I get it centered, I can step up slowly on the drills.
So I'm going to step up fairly slowly with this hole to keep it in center.
Well, I reamed that 1/1000th over, so it'll give a little bit of play in that shaft and make it easier to put together and take apart. Now we got to go for the second hole, which is a 1/4 inch. If I can see it here, yep, there it is. Got to line that up. There it is. So now we're going to reinstall this and fit the gears to it, see if it came out right. I think. Yep, goes right on there. So now we got to get a shim on the back side of that gear. Yep, I think this one's going to work all right. Yep, that's good. Now, it fits on there perfectly. Okay, before I put this all back together, I'm going to put the old handle back on there and put it back just the way it was. And I want you to see the dial indicator as I try to move that a small amount. Okay, I'm going to try to move that a couple of 3/1000ths. It's almost impossible. It just jumps. There, I did 1 then. I tried it 1. Now it went almost 2.5. Yeah, it's just impossible to move it 1/1000th. I mean, that's just a tiny bit of movement, and it goes 50/1000ths. Assemble it, and I'll show you how much easier it is to move it. I can move it 1/1000th almost perfectly. There. That goes in, and this goes on top. Okay. And then we'll put this on. Put the bolts in it. Now, this is with the original handle, not the big one I bought. The reason I bought the other handle was because I thought maybe I could fix it by just putting a bigger handle on it, but it did almost no good whatsoever. All right. This one is only 1 inch larger, and you actually don't have to change the handle. You can use that one fairly well, because you can see now that I can turn it if you get on the other side. I can move this 1/1000th at a time with no trouble. And if I want to go fast, I can go fast. But the thing is, a lot of times you want to just take off 1 or 2 thousandths, and when it's herky-jerky, you can't. It's bouncing back and forth, and you can't set it right. It's all finished. The only thing I have to do is put the nut back on, and the original cover still fits it. It's a little small. I held it on with magnets because I moved this out 1/4 inch, so I'll have to remake that, but it works just as it was with the original magnets. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, subscribe to my channel. Give me a thumbs up. Thank you very much.